Have you ever felt that you were pushed aside by the very people who should be at your side? Have you ever set the table with love, waiting for a message, and instead received silence? In today's video, you will hear the story of Carmen Alvarez, a mother who discovered, in the worst way, that sometimes exclusion doesn't happen by accident, but by choice. This isn't just a story of family rejection. It's about dignity, about the moment when a woman, after decades of caring for everyone, must decide whether she still has a place at the table, or whether it is time to stand up and leave. As you watch, you will find yourself reflecting on your own limits, on how we see love, reciprocity, and what really hurts when affection turns into neglect. If you have ever swallowed pain to keep the peace, or started to suspect that someone's silence has more to say than it seems, stay with me until the end. This story may open your eyes, or help you understand that sometimes the greatest proof of love is for yourself. My name is Carmen. I am 68 years old, and I have already lived through many things in this life, but nothing prepared me for what happened that Sunday. I have been a widow for 13 years, worked as a public nurse for more than 4 decades, and raised my 2 children, Martine and Lorena, alone, with everything I had. I always considered myself a present mother, but without suffocating. I was never one to demand anything from them, not when they were teenagers, nor after they became adults. I always tried to be support, never a burden. My greatest pleasure was always bringing the family together. Sunday dinners became a kind of tradition, something of ours that I insisted on keeping alive. I live alone in a simple apartment, in the same neighborhood where they grew up. It's an area that has seen better days, but for me it carries history, memory, roots. Every Sunday I woke up more animated, prepared something special, even if it was just well-seasoned chicken with rice or homemade bread. I always sent a message asking if I should bring dessert, if they wanted anything different. And even when Martine started to answer more curtly, more distant, I never complained. He has always been more reserved than his sister, more contained. I thought it was just tiredness, routine, grown-up life. That particular Sunday, around 10 in the morning, I got a call from Martine. He told me the dinner wasn't going to happen, that something unexpected had come up. His voice was hurried, as if he didn't want to talk. I asked if everything was all right. He only said yes, that he would explain later. He hung up quickly. I was a little confused, but tried to understand. I didn't want to insist. I thought maybe something serious had happened. Yet one thing wouldn't leave my mind. He didn't even ask if I had already started to prepare anything. He didn't mention rescheduling. It was all too dry, but I swallowed the feeling and went about my tasks. I washed the dishes, tidied the house, tried to distract my mind. Toward the end of the afternoon, around 6, I decided to go for a walk. I usually do that when I feel tightness in my chest. I don't like to keep dwelling. I walked aimlessly along the old streets of the neighborhood until my feet brought me in front of Martine's house. It wasn't planned, I swear. I only realized where I was when I saw the huge tree on his sidewalk. And then, I saw the living room light on. I stopped. I looked again. There was noise, laughter, familiar voices. I drew a little closer, without thinking, and when I got near the window, my heart simply froze. Inside, the table was set as it always was on our Sundays. A colorful tablecloth, ceramic plates that I myself had given them on a wedding anniversary, glasses filled with wine, and there they all were. Martine, his wife, my 2 grandchildren, Lorena, even her husband who rarely showed up. Everyone laughing, eating, toasting. I stayed motionless there for a few seconds, not knowing if it was real. I even felt I would faint. The only thing I could think was, they lied to me. They left me out, on purpose. That wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't distraction. It was choice. My immediate reaction was to walk away, but my feet seemed glued to the ground. I wanted to scream, to knock on the door, to ask what I had done so wrong to be excluded like that, but all I managed was to turn my back and leave, and I walked slowly, as if each step hurt. My face felt hot, as if I had been slapped. A silent slap, the kind no one sees, but that stings more than any other. When I reached the corner, I sat on a bench in the little square and cried. I cried like a child. I felt ridiculous, alone, disposable. I stayed there an amount of time I can't measure. My head spun. I remembered so many things. The nights I pulled double shifts to buy school supplies. The times I didn't buy clothes for myself to pay college tuition. The medicines I hid from Lorena so she wouldn't worry when she had depression. And I thought, did all that lose its value? Was I only useful for a while, and now I'm no good anymore? Because that's how it felt, as if I were an old piece of furniture that spoils the decor. You know that feeling of no longer belonging to a place that was yours? That's exactly how it was. I returned home feeling 100 years old. Every step on the stairs seemed to remind me that I was no longer welcome. When I closed the door, I sat on the sofa and stared at the wall. The silence in my living room swallowed me. And the strangest thing of all, I didn't feel anger. I felt emptiness, a kind of mourning. It was as if my family had died there, before the window, or as if I had died to them. I picked up my phone, opened the last message I had sent to Martine the previous week. Do you want me to bring the pudding on Sunday? And there, reading that, I realized I was still trying to please. I spent a long time holding that phone, staring at the screen as if I would find some answer there. There was none. No apology, no regret, no sign that it had been a mistake. Only silence. I thought about sending a message, asking why they had done that to me. But I knew that if they replied, it would hurt even more. Because there is no justification that fixes this kind of thing. The truth is, they wanted me out. And that tore me inside. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was choice. And that awareness paralyzed me. I stood up, went to the kitchen, and looked at the lasagna dish I had made in the morning. It was still there, covered with aluminum foil, as if still waiting for someone. I took it and put it in the fridge, as if it were possible to store the pain along with it. Then I drifted around the house. I looked at photos, keepsakes, objects that seemed to carry a past that now I don't even know if really existed. I began to ask myself if at any moment I had truly been cherished, or if it was all convenience. If I was only a useful role in their life play, the mother who helps, who cares, who solves, but who now is in the way. And the most absurd of all is that I had done nothing. Nothing. No argument. No falling out. I never imposed anything. Never criticized. I always respected the space, the silences, the limits. Sometimes too much. Perhaps that was my mistake. Staying silent so much. Allowing so much. Accepting too much. I thought that was love. But now I wonder if it wasn't just fear of losing. And ironically, I lost anyway. Without scandal. Without discussion. They just removed me from the table. As if a mother were disposable. As if my place there were temporary. That night, I couldn't sleep. My head spun like a broken wheel. I got up, went to the window and kept looking at the empty street. Outside, everything seemed so quiet, but inside me there was a deafening noise. I started to think about how I would deal with that from now on, whether I would pretend. I hadn't seen, hadn't known, that it was just a misunderstanding, or whether I would face it, ask, demand. But the truth is, I didn't know where to start, because what breaks like that, with coldness, doesn't go back with pretty words, and deep down, I felt that something had died in me that Sunday. The next day, I woke up early. As always, the body rises on autopilot, even when the soul doesn't want to leave the bed. I went straight to the bathroom, washed my face, and faced my reflection in the mirror. Swollen eyes, heavy expression. I tried to breathe deep, convince myself it would pass, that maybe it had all been a misunderstanding, a coincidence. But it was a lie. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw my entire family having dinner without me, and what hurt the most was remembering how natural they all were there, as if my absence were normal, as if I had already been erased from the equation. At breakfast, I couldn't eat anything. The bread stayed there, hard, ignored, while I asked myself if Lorena knew, if she also took part in that exclusion, because if she knew, that would change everything between us. I had always thought I had with her a special bond, woman to woman, mother to daughter. She had always been more affectionate, closer. But now, after what I saw, I no longer knew whom to trust. I began to remember the times she avoided certain subjects, the exchanged looks with Martine, the vague answers. Had I been left aside longer than I realized? The phone rang late in, the morning. It was Lorena. My heart raced. I answered, trying to sound normal, but my voice trembled. She said she would drop by later if I was home. I just answered yes. I didn't ask why, didn't stand on ceremony. I hung up and sat again. Would she explain? Would she pretend she knew nothing? I was between anger and hope, and that mix made me dizzy. I didn't know what to expect from her. Part of me wanted to embrace her and cry. The other part wanted to ask straight to her face, "Do this to me?" Why did you? When she arrived in the early afternoon, she came in with a light smile, as if it were any other day. She brought a carrot cake, said she had made too much and thought of me. I thanked her, put it on the table, but kept looking at her, trying to decipher every gesture, every word. Lorena has always been good with sweet words. She always knew how to ease difficult situations. But that day, I didn't want relief. I wanted truth. I held myself as long as I could, but at a certain moment I blurted, "Lorena, tell me something. Was yesterday's dinner really canceled?" She froze. She was silent for a second that felt like an eternity. Her expression changed at once. It turned serious, as if she had been caught red-handed. She didn't answer immediately. She just looked away and sighed. That silence confirmed everything. I needed nothing else. But even so, I insisted. "You were there, weren't you?" She nodded slowly, with a guilty air. And then she said something that cut through me. "Mom, I didn't want to. I only went because I thought you knew." It was like a punch in the stomach. I thought I would vomit. How come I thought you knew? Knew what? That I was no longer welcome? That I was out of the circle? She tried to justify herself. Said she thought Martine had talked to me. That maybe I had decided not to go because of some disagreement. I listened to that in disbelief. How can someone invent such an absurd version to soothe their own conscience? I never had any disagreement with them. Never. So why this theater? Why this need to erase me from their lives as if I were an inconvenient presence? At that moment, I realized that there was no use looking for logic. There was something much deeper and much crueler. I held back tears with all my strength, but my voice came out choked. "Did you know he called me in the morning saying the dinner was canceled?" She was shocked. She didn't know. Immediately, her face crumpled. She began to mumble an apology, saying she would never have gone if she had known that. And then, for the first time, I saw truth in her eyes. I saw it wasn't pretending, that she really didn't know about the lie, and that broke me in another way, because then I realized the real problem was with Martine. He lied. He wanted me left out, and the rest was only consequence. Lorena cried, tried to hug me. I allowed it, but I stayed stiff. The body accepted the hug, but the heart didn't follow. I was still in pieces inside. It's not easy to discover you were rejected by your own son, that he looked into the mirror of his life and decided you no longer fit. It's a kind of pain that has no name. I felt like an old book someone shoved to the back of the shelf, and the worst thing is, I didn't know if I had strength to put myself back on the shelf. After Lorena left, I walked around the house like a wandering soul. Every corner seemed to echo the emptiness of that exclusion. The rug my grandchildren loved to lie on, the mugs, with their names that I had made, the drawings kept on the fridge. Everything became a reminder of what I had lost. It wasn't just the dinner, nor that Sunday. It was the bond. It was the trust. I realized that that moment before the window was a kind of rupture, something you can no longer unsee, nor ununderstand. For days, I mulled over everything in silence. I told no one. I didn't call Martine, didn't confront anyone else. I isolated myself. But the body feels, right? I began to have chest pain, high blood pressure, insomnia. I would wake up in the middle of the night hearing their laughter again through the window, as if my brain had recorded it to torture me. I began to question everything. Was I really a good mother? Did I ever cross the line and they didn't know how to tell me? But however much I searched my memory, I found nothing to justify such disdain. A friend of mine, Donna Norma, noticed I was different. One day she showed up with a pot of flowers and kept insisting we have coffee. I resisted, but let her in. When she sat, she looked at me and said, "Carmen, you're sick from the inside out. Someone hurt you badly." Those words made me break down. I cried in front of her for the first time, without holding back. I told her everything. She listened with that silence of someone who understands. Then she only said, "Now, you need to decide what you'll do with that pain. Will you let yourself die, or will you be reborn from it? I spent the following days with that phrase hammering in my head. I didn't want to play the victim, but I also couldn't keep pretending. Something inside me said I needed to take a stand. For the first time in my life, maybe. I had always swallowed everything. I was always the one who yielded, who understood, who waited. But that Sunday, I had been pushed out of my own family, and if I didn't respect myself, no one else would. I decided then that I needed to speak to Martin, but not by phone, not in desperation. I would look him in the eyes and say everything. I waited until the next Friday. I knew he left work earlier that day, so I went to his house late in the afternoon. I took nothing. No cake, no flowers, no smile. I only took myself, as I was, with the weight of the week on my body and the truth stuck in my throat. I knocked on the door, and his wife answered. Her face when she saw me was surprise. She called me Dona Carmen, as always, but with that tone of someone who didn't expect to use the title. I asked to speak with him. She hesitated, but called him. Martin came to the door with the car keys in hand, as if he already wanted to leave. When he saw me, he stopped. He stood there, motionless. I looked him in the eyes and said, I saw everything on Sunday. I saw the table set, the laughter, the glasses of wine. I saw my family gathered without me. He turned pale. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it trembled. I said I wasn't there to fight, but to understand that after everything I lived, after everything I did for them, I at least deserved an explanation, a truth, no matter how hard. He took time to respond. He ran a hand over his face, looked at the ground, at the sky, at anything but me, and then he blurted, Mom, it's just that sometimes you're too much. You want to be in everything, and we feel like we don't have space. That cut me. Too much how? I was too much because I loved, because I cared, because I cooked, asked, wanted to be around. That sounded like punishment for existing. I took a deep breath and asked, Do you find me a nuisance, Martin? And he didn't answer. He stayed silent. And that silence was the cruelest answer of all. In that instant, I felt something break inside me. A part that still hoped for an apology, an attempt at closeness, died there. I said I wouldn't insist anymore, that he could rest assured, that I wouldn't show up by surprise anymore, that I wouldn't send messages asking about Sunday anymore, that he had gotten what he wanted, an absent mother. I saw he tried to say something, but I turned my back before, not because of pride, but because if I stayed one more second, I would beg him to want me back, and that I would no longer do. I went back home walking slowly, as if each step were a farewell to what I believed to be my family. I didn't cry then. I felt a strange calm, as if I had finally stopped swimming against the current. I understood at last that there are things we don't fix. We just accept. I arrived, took off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was silent, as always. But that day, the silence did not hurt. For the first time in a long time, it felt honest. Better to be alone than in bad company, even if it's your own children. The next day, I went to the market and bought flowers. Flowers for myself. I put them on the dining room table. That table that I used to leave set for Sunday, like someone waiting for visitors. But now it wasn't for anyone. It was for me. And while I arranged the vases, I had a simple but strong thought. I wasn't born to live eternally for others. They always told me that being a mother was to give yourself, and I gave myself entirely. But now it was time to take myself back, not out of revenge, nor pride, but out of self-love, because no one deserves to be thrown out of their own story. I began to change some routines. I woke up, made my coffee calmly, put on my music, read a little. I started walking every day again, but chose different routes, so I wouldn't pass Martin's street anymore. I cut that path like someone closing a wound. At first it hurt, a lot, but each day it hurt less, until it became just a memory, and little by little I started to feel something I hadn't felt in ages. Lightness. A melancholic lightness. Yes, but still, lightness. Because when we stop begging for crumbs of affection, there's room to breathe. It was in that process that I found a part of me I didn't even remember. I went back to crocheting, something my mother taught me when I was a teenager. I took the box where I kept the yarn, fixed my needles, sat on the balcony and let my hands create. It was there, In that simple movement of intertwining threads, that I realized I was still capable of building beautiful things, even alone, even rejected, even after pain. I could still weave my own piece, in my own way, in my own time. A few weeks later, Lorena sought me out again. This time, she didn't come with cake or excuses. She sat on the sofa, took off her shoes, and looked at me with eyes that knew it was no longer possible to pretend nothing had happened. She told me that after that day, she and Martin talked, that he admitted he really excluded me, that he didn't want me at the dinner, and that it was he who convinced everyone not to tell me. He said he needed time without you, she said. That hurt me again, but with less intensity, as if the skin had already thickened. She also said she felt bad for having taken part, even unknowingly, that she was ashamed, that she didn't know how to fix it. I listened in silence, a knot in my throat. In the end, I could only say, "Lorena, I don't need anyone to apologize crying. I just need to be treated with truth." She nodded, hugged me again, and this time I returned it with a bit more firmness. But still, I kept my heart on alert, because forgiveness, for me, isn't a word. It's change. That night, I kept thinking about how much we lose ourselves trying to keep ties. How many times I kept silent, bent, erased myself, just to keep harmony. But what is this harmony if it only exists when we accept disappearing? I realized that I no longer wanted relationships based on tolerance. I wanted true affection. And if that was asking too much, then I preferred to be alone, with my frozen lasagna, my plants, and my crochet. At least in those I could trust. At least there was no rejection disguised as love. The following Sunday, for the first time in years, I prepared nothing. I didn't cook a special lunch, didn't set the table with care, didn't send messages asking whether they were coming. I spent the day in silence, with a book in my lap and a cup of tea. When night fell, I looked at my phone. No message, no call, no invitation. And you know what surprised me the most? I didn't cry. I didn't miss them. I felt freedom, because at that moment, I realized that it wasn't me who had been left aside. I was the one who had finally stopped offering. Myself. After that silent Sunday, I started to understand better what it was to live for myself. It had been years revolving around other people's schedules, birthdays, family gatherings I organized, memories I kept for everyone. And suddenly, I had time. Time that was only mine. I enrolled in a free gardening course happening in the neighborhood square. I went alone, barefaced, a bit unsure what to expect. But I came home with my hands dirty with soil and my heart light. It was as if, by working the earth, I was also replanting pieces of myself. I began to meet other women from the neighborhood, women who also had stories of abandonment, of silences, of children who disappeared after growing up. It was strange to see how our pain can resemble that of so many others. We created a Wednesday coffee group, nothing fancy. Each brought something. We talked, exchanged recipes and sorrows. That nourished me in a way no Sunday dinner could anymore. It was a space where I didn't need to pretend everything was fine. There I could just be Carmen, not the mother, not the grandmother, not the one who cooks, but myself. Little by little, I filled the spaces of the house with other presences. I don't mean visitors, but myself, being truly in every corner. I changed the living room curtain, painted an old cabinet, placed new flowers on the balcony. Nothing expensive, nothing grand, but everything with my touch. And I realized it was the first time in a long time I did things without expecting anyone's approval. I was not waiting for anyone to visit or praise me. I just wanted to feel alive again. And that, unbelievably, no longer depended on them. Of course it still hurt. I won't lie. Sometimes I'd see a memory on Facebook, an old photo, and feel that knot in my throat. On some Sundays, I still woke up with the old desire to cook lunch, to set the table. But I breathed deep, went to the mirror and reminded myself, you don't need to beg for love. Love is not begged. And if you have to force it, it's no longer worth it. It was hard to accept that, because we were raised to believe that a mother has to bear everything, but she doesn't. No one does. One day I went to the pharmacy and met my eldest grandson, Santiago. He had headphones on, seemed distracted, but recognized me and came to hug me. It was a shy hug, somewhat awkward, but sincere. I asked how he was. He said fine, that school was tough. And then, out of the blue, he said, "We missed you at dinner that day." I froze. I looked into his eyes and asked, "Did you know I wasn't invited?" He lowered his head and answered, "I knew, but I thought it would be worse if I said something." That moment was a mix of sadness and tenderness, because he was still just a teenager trying to navigate adult's mess. I couldn't blame him, but that showed me even the little ones see what's wrong. And worse, they learned to keep quiet. I came back home with that weighing on my chest. Was that what I was leaving as a legacy? A family that learns to hide, silence, exclude? I wondered if at some point I had passed on that same behavior, unknowingly. If I myself, by accepting so much in silence, had taught that it's okay to erase someone from the table. After that meeting with Santiago, I mulled over it for days, until one Sunday, I decided to do something different. I took a basket with pieces of cake, breads I had baked, and a simple handwritten note. "If someday you want to drop by, I'll be on the balcony, having coffee." I left it at Martine's building door, rang the bell, and left, without staying to see the reaction, without expecting an answer. It was just a last attempt, not at reconciliation, but to show that there was still a space, if they wished to fill it. And the days passed. No response, no visit, nothing. But for some reason, I didn't collapse. On the contrary, I felt firmer, because I knew I had done everything I could, with dignity. And when we do things with truth, pain may come, but it doesn't corrode. It only passes, and leaves in its place something called clarity. The clarity of who we are, of who is really at our side, and of who only occupies space in our life while we allow it. About 3 Sundays after that, I received a message from Martine's wife. Short, direct. "Can we talk?" I looked at it for a few minutes. The woman who barely spoke to me now wanted to talk. I replied only, "Yes." We arranged to meet the next day, at the bakery near my house. When I arrived, she was nervous. She sat, ordered a coffee, and began speaking bluntly. She said the decision to leave me out was, yes, partly influenced by her, that she felt I took up too much space in the family routine, and she wanted the kids to get used to depending less on me. I confess that hearing that caused me a mixture of anger and relief. Anger, because it was cruel, but relief, because finally someone was telling the truth. I didn't need to guess anymore, nor build theories. She didn't expect Martine to go so far, that he overdid it, that she just wanted a little space, not total exclusion. I looked into her eyes and said calmly, "You got the space you wanted. I just don't know if you know what to do with it now." She lowered her eyes. We stayed silent for a few seconds. She seemed sorry, but I no longer wanted to take that in. Before leaving, she still said the boys had been asking about me, that they missed the food, the stories. That hurt me. A lot. But I just said, "They have my address. Whenever they want, they can come." And I stood up. Because at that point, I already knew that any move from me to reconnect needed to come from a firm place, not needy. I no longer wanted to return to a role where I was only accepted if I fitted their molds. If I were to relate to my family, it had to be as equals, not as someone asking permission to exist. On the way home, I felt a strange peace, as if, for the first time, I was truly in control of my story. Not because everything was solved, far from it, but because I stopped twisting myself to fit where there was no space. I started writing in a notebook, almost like a diary. Simple stuff, just to organize my thoughts. And there I understood that my pain had a name, unexplained absence, and that my healing would also have a name, presence with intention. I began to promise myself I would never again be anywhere I had to diminish myself. In all this process, I came to value even more the friendships I had unwittingly set aside. I reconnected with Estella, a colleague from hospital days, who was also retired. We arranged a lunch at her house, and it was like going back in time. We laughed, shared stories, spoke of grandchildren, of pains and silences we had carried for years. It was one of the first times in a long time that I felt heard, without judgment. I realized I had spent years trying to be heard by my own, when perhaps the problem was they never really wanted to listen. Gradually, I expanded that circle. I enrolled in an embroidery class at the neighborhood association. There I met amazing women, full of stories. One of them, Donna Ruth, told me something I'll never forget. We spend our whole lives being everyone's right arm. When we get old, they discover the right arm can also get tired. That hit me hard. That was exactly how I felt. Tired. Not just physically, but emotionally. Of trying to prove my worth where they no longer wanted to recognize it. Of offering love as if it were obligation, and getting silence in return. One day, out of nowhere, I received a message from Lorena saying she wanted to come have dinner with me. I confess I hesitated, but I replied yes. I made simple rice, saffron chicken, a well-seasoned salad. When she arrived, she brought the grandchildren. It was a light evening. We didn't talk about what happened. There was no need. She was there, present, with attentive, respectful eyes. The grandchildren hugged me with true longing. That warmed me. It wasn't the return of the old tradition. It was something else. A new beginning. More sincere. Smaller, perhaps, but much more real. After she left, I sat on the balcony looking at the sky. It was starry, quiet, and I thought, it's not that everything has gone back to normal, but maybe I am discovering a new normal, in which I put myself first, in which I no longer accept crumbs, in which I only stay where there is reciprocity, and above all, in which I understand that being a mother isn't accepting everything in silence. Being a mother is also teaching limits, even to the children, especially to them, because love without respect supports no house, and I'm tired of carrying alone the weight of an entire house. With time, I realized the hardest part wasn't their absence. It was relearning to occupy my own presence. The house was no longer a scenario of waiting, but a space of construction. I moved the furniture around, donated things I had kept for years, without reason, painted one kitchen wall mustard yellow, all with my hands, without depending on anyone. Each change was like telling myself, you still can, you still exist. And that, more than any reconciliation, gave me strength to go on. Martine never showed up again, nor answered my message. But, curiously, that stopped hurting like before. It was as if I had finally accepted that not everything gets fixed, and that some relationships really need to stay in the past, so we can move on in peace. I still loved my son. That didn't change. But loving doesn't mean accepting everything. And when I understood that, it felt like lifting a ton off my back. The motherhood they taught me was full of guilt, sacrifice, silence. The one I started to build after the pain was made of choices, including choosing to preserve myself. Wednesday coffee with the neighborhood women became one of the highlights of my week. There, none of us had to prove anything. Some brought sewing, others brought cake, others only brought presents, and all shared bits of life. One day, one of them said, "Carmen, you've changed a lot since you got here." I smiled, because I knew it was true. I changed, not because I wanted to, but because life demanded, and instead of breaking, I chose to remake myself, piece by piece, in my own way, in my own time. One afternoon, while watering the balcony plants, I received a letter. Yes, a letter. It was from Santiago, handwritten, with slightly crooked handwriting. He said he missed me, the childhood stories, the lasagna with crispy crust, the long hugs. He said he didn't quite understand what had happened, but thought it unfair. And he finished saying, "You have always been my safe place. I hope I can visit you again." I cried reading that, because it was pure, spontaneous, his, and it was there I understood. Sometimes the restart comes from where we least expect. I stored the letter carefully inside my bedside book. I read and reread it several times in the following days. Each word felt like a hug, a silent apology that didn't come from the adults, but from someone who still saw with a clean heart. I decided to reply, not by letter, but with an invitation. I sent him a message saying that if he wanted, he could come have dinner with me next Sunday. Just him. No formality, just a dinner between grandmother and grandson. He replied in seconds. "I will, Grandma. I miss you." That was enough to warm my whole week. On Nisao. Sunday I did everything calmly. Lasagna, natural juice, salad with the dressing he loved when he was little. The house was simple but welcoming. When he arrived, he gave me a long hug, the kind only a grandson who misses you can give. We talked for hours. We spoke of school, music, how fast he was growing. We didn't talk about Martine, and that relieved me. It was a space just for us. without the hurts from above, without the coldness of complicated adults, just two people trying to keep alive. A beautiful relationship, even amid the rubble. After he left, I sat on the sofa with a new feeling. It wasn't full joy, but gratitude. A quiet, serene gratitude for still having bonds that are worth it, for being able to build relationships beyond what was broken. I understood that maybe I was no longer the center of the family as before, but that didn't make me disposable. It only placed me elsewhere, a more conscious place, more free, smaller in size perhaps, but greater in self-respect. And that, for me, was a huge gain. In the following Sundays, Santiago began to come fairly often, sometimes with a piece of cake from his mother, sometimes with a movie for us to watch together. And little by little, the emptiness of the house was filled with sincere small presences. Not the ones I expected, but the ones that really mattered. I didn't force anything. I didn't ask about Martín, nor charged Lorena. I let things flow as they had to, because after everything, what I least wanted was to go back to living, begging to be accepted. Now I only wanted to live in peace with those who truly saw me. One day, I was at the market buying fruit when I saw Martín across the street. He saw me too. We looked at each other for a few seconds that felt like hours. He took a step as if to cross, but stopped. I simply turned my face and kept choosing my apples, not out of rancor, but because at that moment, I understood there was nothing more to be said. Sometimes the greatest answer is silence, and my life now was so full of small, true things that I no longer wanted to waste time trying to fix what didn't want to be fixed. I won't deny that it shook me a little. I returned home with my chest tight, but soon I watered the plants, listened to my music, answered the women's group messages, and the pain passed. Because now, I had a refuge. I had routines that healed me. I had people who wanted me around without my needing to bend. That made all the difference. I discovered there is enormous freedom in stopping waiting for the return of those who chose to leave, and that our energy must be invested in those who give back with truth, not with crumbs of obligation. Some people may read this and think, but he's your son. And yes, he is. He always will be. But I am also me. And no one ever taught me this, that being a mother does not annul me as a person, that I too have the right to limits, to rest, to be cared for. I spent decades giving all of myself, and in return, received a silence that expelled me from the table I helped build. That's not drama. That's fact. And if to stay emotionally alive I needed to distance myself, so be it. Because staying there silent, accepting, would be dying a little every day. Today, when someone asks how my children are, I answer serenely, they are following their path. And I, mine. I no longer need to justify, nor invent excuses. I do not wish ill, do not carry resentment, but neither do I place myself again in the role of the one who waits. If someday they want to return with truth, I will be here, whole, not in halves, without pleas. And if they don't return, I'll go on just the same, with my plants, my embroidery, my coffees shared with other women who also decided to bloom after the fall. As months passed, I realized that some pains don't disappear. They just change place inside us. They stopped shouting and started whispering now and then. Sometimes at dusk, when the sun hits the living room curtain, I still remember the old Sundays, the smells that filled the house, the conversations at the table, but not with sadness, with tenderness, because even though they hurt me, those memories were real, and remembering them doesn't mean I want to go back. It only means they were part of me, and now they belong to the past, where they should stay. One day, Santiago brought his younger sister. He said she wanted to meet the grandma of the famous lasagna. When she came in, with those curious eyes and shy smile, I felt a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. It was a new kind of love, rebuilt. We made cookies together. She helped me decorate the balcony with string lights, and in the end, she gave me a drawing saying, "You are special." I kept it like a treasure, because in that gesture, there was something pure, innocent, and above all, voluntary. No one forced, no one ordered. She came because she wanted to, and that is what guides me today, to be where I am desired, not where I am tolerated. I learned at great cost that presence is worth nothing without intention, and that family is not just a blood tie, it's a tie of choice, of caring, of exchange. Some people followed their path, and I follow mine. And on that path, I chose peace. I chose to suffice for myself. I chose not to beg for affection. I learned I can comfort myself when no one else knows how. And that, as lonely as it sounds, is the deepest form of freedom I have ever known. If someday Martin knocks on, my door with truth in his eyes, maybe we can talk. But I won't chase a place where I'm not wanted anymore. Today, if he comes, he'll find a whole mother, not half a one. A woman who has aged, yes, but who has also been reborn. And that rebirth was silent, without applause, without audience. It was on the kitchen floor, in the silence of the balcony, in the smell of bread coming out of the oven. And if I learned anything in all this, it's that sometimes we need to lose what we thought essential to discover what really matters. That night when I received Santiago's letter, I understood that not everything was lost. Maybe I didn't have the perfect family, nor always present children, but there were still possible bonds, more sincere, more simple. It wasn't about going back to what was, but about starting from what remained. I kept the letter with care inside my old recipe notebook, that stained cover with loose pages, because there were the things I built with affection, and he, with that gesture, deserved to be kept there. The following Sunday, he came to dinner with me. He brought the younger sister and a dessert they tried to make together. The kitchen turned into a mess. The table was full of crumbs, and my living room seemed to have gone back in time. But I didn't wish Martin were there. For the first time, I didn't miss him. That absence was no longer an open wound. It was just a part of what was left behind. I focused on the present, 2 children looking at me with affection, truly listening to me, laughing at my stories. That was enough. During that same period, I got an invitation to speak to a women's group in the neighborhood, to tell my story. I thought no one would be interested, but I went. I sat in a circle with ladies who, like me, had been silent for decades. When I finished, one of them came closer and said, "You spoke my pain with your voice." There I understood my old silence was not just mine. It belonged to many, and if my experience could give someone courage to place themselves where they deserve, then let it be. Let my pain serve to open doors, even if only a crack. Since then, I began leaving small notes with snippets of what I lived on park benches, inside library books, even in the health center line. Some disappeared, others returned with handwritten phrases. Thank you for saying what I never could. I wasn't seeking recognition. It was just the desire to turn loneliness into a bridge. And deep down, I knew many people are like me. People who did everything right, yet were forgotten. People who got tired of being invisible presence and finally decided to turn on the light for themselves. One of these days, I met Martin's wife at the market. She greeted me from afar, waved with an awkward smile. I responded politely, but went on my way. I felt no anger, nor pity, only the certainty that some distances don't need to be traveled again. Life had already shown me who really wanted to be around, and who only tolerated me for convenience. And I no longer wished to fit where there was no real space. My house today isn't crowded, but it is peaceful. It smells of cake in the oven, the sound of an old radio playing softly, plants growing on the balcony. I receive few people, but those who come look me in the eyes. I no longer need to justify my existence to anyone. I suffice for myself, and that is a victory no one can take from me. I learned that self-love doesn't shout. It settles in silence and organizes the mess inside. And when that happens, we no longer accept crumbs, no matter how familiar they seem. Another day, a young woman who read one of my notes sought me out. She said that, after reading it, she had the courage to leave the house where she was only used. We cried together, 2 strangers united by the pain of not being seen, and that made me think, maybe I couldn't keep my family as I dreamed, but maybe I'm helping other people stand tall, and that is also legacy, also love, the kind that doesn't expect return but transforms. If someday Martin comes to my door with sincerity in his look, I will listen, but I don't wait anymore, because waiting too much was what made me sick. Today, I only open doors for those who understand that presence is choice, not obligation. And that respect is the minimum between people who call themselves family. What's past is past. I won't deny it still hurts sometimes, but it no longer defines me. Their abandonment doesn't erase the love I gave. It only taught me that, to keep loving, I first needed to take myself back and rebuild. I am not a soap opera woman. I am a real-life woman. And in real life, not every reconciliation happens. Not every wound heals pretty. But still, we can go on. We can find new meanings, new people, new Sundays. And we can even discover there is a version of us that blooms when no one else believes. That's what I did. In the midst of exclusion, I sprouted. In the silence, I listened to myself. In the absence, I found myself again. Today, if someone asks whether I am happy, I answer without hesitation. I am whole. Not perfect, not surrounded by people, but whole. And being whole, after having been broken so many times, is perhaps the greatest happiness there is. Because now, everything around me is choice, not leftovers. And when we choose ourselves, life starts to make sense in a new way. Calmer, more honest. If you have come this far and felt similar to me, I just tell you one thing. You are not alone. There is life after the pain. There is light after exclusion. And you don't need to wait to be invited back to the table to know your worth. Sometimes the table must be another. The place, another. The people, too. But what matters is that you sit, and that you serve yourself first. With respect. With love. With truth. If you stayed until the end, thank you for accompanying me. Maybe you've also felt pushed aside by those who should welcome you most. Maybe you've swallowed silence to keep the peace, or carried a longing no one saw. If so, I just want to tell you, your pain is valid, and your worth doesn't depend on the space others give you, but on the love you decide to offer yourself. Tell me here in the comments if this story touched you in any way, or if you have gone through something similar. Sometimes, sharing what we feel is the first step to not carrying everything alone. And you can be sure, your voice also deserves to be heard. If you can, share this video with someone going through a hard moment. Sometimes, all a person needs is to know they are not the only one, that there is life after silence, that it is possible to start again, even without applause. And if you want to keep hearing real stories that move inside and talk about what no one sees, stay here with us. There is still a lot of life to be told.